Welcome back to Homegirl Astrology. This is Ebony. Eclipses can feel like life hitting the fast forward button. Doors slam shut, new ones fly open. On September 21st, we've got a partial solar eclipse at 29 degrees Virgo, the very last degree of the sign. That is crisis territory, urgency, a final exam. And speaking of exams, and since school just started back for a lot of folks, here is the syllabus for this video. We'll cover why do eclipses hit so hard? What's the history of this particular cycle of eclipses? And what themes do we expect in the world, in the US, and in your own life? I'll be kind and include some cliff notes, aka timestamps, and a recap at the end. So what is an eclipse? A solar eclipse is basically the moon photobombing the sun, sliding in front, blocking the spotlight. Sometimes it's a full takeover, sometimes just a partial block. Sometimes we get a dramatic ring of fire effect from an annular eclipse. Eclipses shake things loose. They bring sudden endings, faded beginnings, and truths that you can't unsee. The universe loves a plot twist, don't she? Now, every eclipse links up with the moon's nodes, those invisible points where the moon's path crosses the sun's path. The north node is your growth plan. So it's about building up, expanding, leveling up, growing. The south node is like taking out the trash. Okay, so it's not fun, but if you don't clear it out, then you're gonna be the smelly house on the block, right? We don't want that for you. And we could also have vermin, insects, all types of stuff happen when you don't take the trash out. So we gotta do it. Now, this eclipse is a south node eclipse. So the translation there is, it's purge season, babe. Expect the theme of letting go to pop up again and again. Now let's talk about the Saros Cycle. Eclipses don't just pop up out of nowhere. They travel in families called Saros Cycles that repeat every 18 years or so. Think of it like cosmic ancestry. Each eclipse is a descendant in a long line of eclipses, like thousands of years long. Now, there are many of these families running at the same time. So yes, we'll have other eclipses next year and the year after that, but they won't be a part of this particular lineage of eclipses. This eclipse is the 7th in a series of 154. And the older siblings showed up in 1917, 1935, 1953, 1971, 1989, and 2007. And each time the same family's DNA shows up on the world stage with same themes, different headlines. You know how certain families are just kind of known for a certain thing? Like the Jackson family could sing and dance, right? The Olsens, we got the twins and Elizabeth, they all got the same face, they all act. The Wayans family, synonymous with comedy, and Damon is the finest. It's not up for debate. So anyway, this family of eclipses carries the DNA of Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, Venus, and Pluto. So what are we going to be talking about? Themes like distressing news, worries about loved ones, breakdowns in communication, headaches with paperwork, news that feels heavy, fated, unavoidable, news about death, dark thoughts, pessimism, even nervous system stuff like trouble grasping things mentally, but even physically as well, dropping your pens and your paper clips and all that. We're also looking at plagiarism, false information, obsessions in love, and what I like to call collection mania, which is basically hoarding, going crazy over things like la boo boo. And this one has a lot to do in general with being in your head. Now, I'm about to get into the nitty gritty for my deep divers. But don't worry, again, I've got timestamps and there'll be a recap at the end if you want the microwave version. You want it right here, hot, ready. All right, at 29 degrees Virgo, this eclipse lands on the Anaretic Degree. That comes from the Greek word anaretos, meaning without virtue. Basically, this is the last gasp of the sign. It's the pressure test. We're finishing Virgo's lessons. Health, work, analysis, while already feeling that pull into Libra's relational terrain. Think of this like giving 2 weeks notice at a job. Technically, you're still there, but mentally, you're checked out. You're thinking about your next job, and honestly, the company is already thinking about your backfill. So when you try to make decisions at the job that you're leaving, they tend to not carry the same weight. And that's the Anaretic Degree. It's a point of crisis, transition, a big push to release old patterns, again, release, so you're ready for the next cycle. Now, let's talk about Virgo. Virgo is a mutable earth sign ruled by Mercury. It's analytical, skeptical, obsessed with restoring order and keeping things running. Virgo's tagline is basically, make it make sense. Okay? Make it make sense. And it doesn't have to make sense to everybody. I just need it to make sense to me. Everyone thinks Virgos are supposed to be neat freaks, but it's like, they're not necessarily neat freaks. As long as they know where stuff is, they're good, right? Virgos can thrive in chaos as long as they know how to move. Now, people love to complain that Virgos are too critical, but honestly, that's part of the job description. Virgo is supposed to be critical. In medical astrology, Virgo rules the small intestine, the part of your body that decides what gets absorbed and what gets tossed. It separates the nutrients from the waste. And that's the whole vibe, safety through discernment. Because if you try to hold on to everything that you ingest, including contaminated food, toxic energy, whatever, it can literally kill you. So yeah, there's a reason Virgo stays uptight and cautious and sometimes a little worried. That vigilance is survival. Now with this eclipse, watch out for food that isn't safe. Virgo is the sign that says an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But every Virgo person knows people are hard-headed and don't really listen that well. Still, this eclipse demands discernment because the stakes really are life and death. Let's transition to looking at the chart itself. The Sabian symbol for the last degree of Virgo is a false call, unheard, and attention to immediate service. Translation, it's about knowing the difference between what feels urgent but isn't real versus what's actually important. It's the reminder to stay grounded, conserve your energy, and put your service where it truly matters. So the key word here is safeguard. And the big themes, cleanliness and safety, healthcare and prevention, restoring order to broken systems, and most of all, thinking critically. Now, in the US chart, which is what I've got pulled up here, the eclipse is falling in the 8th house. That is the realm of shared money, debt, mortality, and danger through war or disaster. And it reflects back onto the 2nd house of assets, revenue, food supplies. In other words, it's shining a spotlight on what we owe versus what we own. So debt could skyrocket, which tracks, right? Folks are getting laid off left and right, and bills still got to get paid somehow. The fallback could look like credit cards, loans, or leaning on other people for support. We could also see major issues around taxation, FEMA, even war funding. And here's the kicker, the 8th house itself is considered the Anaretic house in the chart. So we're doubling down on that crisis, crossroads, transitional energy. Let's take a look at some of the aspects to the eclipse. First off, we've got Saturn in opposition. Now with Saturn, we're layering in anxiety, fear, depression, restriction, loss, separation, grief. That weight of responsibility is pressing down. And Saturn is essentially a planet that tells you you better shit or get off the pot, right? Get serious or go. And in the USA, Saturn is trying to force a reality check, especially around the nation's resources. That is money and food, since it's here in the 2nd house. But there's a catch though. Saturn is retrograde and it's in Pisces, which is a difficult sign for Saturn. So the systems that we've built or are trying to build are eroding. The money ain't right. The food ain't right. We can't trust it. Okay. Now Neptune is in the mix as well. So cue confusion, disillusionment, disappointment. It's that push pull between scarcity and escapism, between discipline and drift. And here's what makes it personal. Saturn rules the 1st house of this chart. So it represents the people, which means the American people are hanging out in the 2nd house of money, broke, anxious, frustrated. And it makes me think of that song, This is America. Broke in the 2nd house, broke in the 2nd house, or whatever Childish Gambino said. But where there's scarcity, there are scammers, right? There's also imagination with Neptune. So we're having to get creative with what we have. Let me know if you ever had to make a wish sandwich in your life. Put it in comments. Anyway, I recorded a whole video on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, so I'm going to link it. But those same themes are going to be loud with this eclipse because of that opposition. So just to recap that video quickly, this is a combination for suffering, misery, poverty, and illness that lingers, problems with water and travel, undermining circumstances leading to a state of illness. That's a direct quote from the combination of stellar influences. And when I was talking with some fellow millennials this week, we all hit on the same note, right? That this Saturn-Neptune tension between wanting a revolution, but also not wanting to give up the comfort that we've built. Some of us have families, some of us have nest eggs, right? But let's be real that comfort is being ripped away anyway. Ain't nobody comfortable for real, right? We're becoming hyper aware of our economic insecurity. Every day on LinkedIn is depressing AF. Well, where is the money going? The ruler of the second house is Jupiter. And we'd say it's in the seventh house because it's so close based on the 5-degree rule, which means that the money is flowing into the house of open enemies, AKA the folks we don't fool with and the ones that don't fool with us back, okay? So it's going to international warfare, to treaties, agreements with other nations. And yes, technically, the seventh house also rules marriage. So there could be some influence of money going to marriage. So listen, if the US suddenly starts paying people to get married or give additional tax breaks to married couples beyond what already exists, I want every single one of you to just cash out me $5. That's all I'm asking for, okay? Give me $5 for calling it, all right? And then there's Mars. In this US eclipse chart, Mars rules the third house. This is the house of media, education, propaganda, communication, transit, domestic transportation, the postal service, public opinion, and freedom of speech. And Mars also rules the 10th house as the ruler of Scorpio. The 10th house represents the president, authority figures, the nation's reputation, trade, and influence. Mars is sitting at the Anaretic Degree as well. So the translation is that we are in crisis mode. The communications are in crisis. Freedom of speech is in crisis. Transportation is in crisis. Our leaders, our authority figures, also in crisis. And Mars is in the 9th house. So all the propaganda, the authority, and the influence I just mentioned, it's getting exported overseas into the universities, through religious institutions, into advertising. So again, be discerning. Now, if we use derived houses, Mars being in the 9th puts the president in his own 12th house. Quick reminder, the 12th house is the land of self-sabotage, isolation, chronic illness, and yes, hospitals and prisons. So Donald Trump could be in his own dark night of the soul moment under this eclipse, dealing with a chronic illness, maybe battling hidden enemies, or wrestling with mental anguish. And it's not just him, our trade, our global influence as the USA, they're also tucked away in that 12th house. They're hidden, compromised. And if you want to go deeper into that, into the 12th house, I've got a whole video on the 12th house you can check out, and I'll link it for you. Oh my God. Now back to the eclipse itself. It's conjunct Mercury. So now we're talking communication, trade, transit, teaching, young people. And Mercury, Uranus, and Pluto are forming a grand trine through the air signs. And that's a mix that can look like sudden awareness, rapid technical leaps, overstimulated nerves, fanatical pursuit of plans, and an irresistible power of suggestion. Basically, they're trying to hypnotize us. Again, discernment is the key word here. Even though the right has demonized the word woke, this is exactly the time to stay woke, okay? Be careful with the media that you consume. And yes, I see the irony of me saying that while I'm on a media platform and I'm a certified hypnotist. But I'm serious. If that means you got to cut back on YouTube or any other places that you would see me at, I'm gonna be all right, okay? This is bigger than views. Media literacy is key. Mercury-Uranus also points to electronic communication, and it's a classic combination for astrology and astrologers. But Pluto is also in the mix too, and Pluto does what Pluto does, which is shuts things down by any means necessary. And remember, Pluto abducted Persephone. That's the energy, that's the snatching energy. The power shift is real, and the question is, who's doing the shutting down? And this is not some abstract thing. Pluto is rising in the first house here. So the shift is looming. And my local NBC affiliate just laid off lots of staff and anchors, people who'd been there for decades, voices that were considered too left-leaning. Mercury-Uranus can mean rebellious ideology, and right now, that rebellious ideology is embroiled in a power struggle. And let me be clear, if you don't see me on IG, TikTok, YouTube, or my newsletter for a month or so, check on me, okay? I'm not playing with y'all. Historically, astrologers have been silenced, exiled, and even annihilated for this work. I'm not just being paranoid, but you know, when the administration starts pulling from that guy's playbook, you know, that guy with the jacked up mustache, and remembering that astrologers were persecuted in Germany, yes, your girl has a reason to be concerned. But Pluto in this chart is raising big questions about power, survival, and who controls the narrative. Now, moving on. Chiron is standing on the Mars-Zeus midpoint. I don't even have Zeus on the screen right now, but that is a combination that brings war injuries, isolation, wounds due to conflicts, firearm-related injuries. From a U.S. perspective, what's new? You know, we stay shooting, right? But this isn't just about us. This is a combination that's going to have global reach. Now, a couple of more points on Saturn, all right? Remember, Saturn rules the people in this chart. It's retrograde in Pisces, and it is also quincunx Mars, which here again represents the president, the authorities, the propaganda machine. To me, quincunxes are messy. They feel like a powder keg. You see the issue, but you don't want to touch it because you're like nervous about what's about to happen. But if you don't, it's going to blow up anyway. You might as well try to at least handle things safely, call in appropriate people who can fix things. So in this case, the people are watching what the president, the authorities, the media are all doing and trying to tell ourselves that's not really happening. I've heard lots of people say it feels like we're in a simulation, and it does. But I'm here to tell you this thing is happening. Things have to be dealt with. And if they are not dealt with, then eventually they will deal with you, because that's how quincunxes work. And Mars-Saturn aspects in general are classic markers for work stoppages and layoffs, but also death, the end of movement, putting the brakes on activity. And just to say this again, Saturn is conjunct Neptune as well. So things get a little slippery. The truth gets slippery. Neptune is the planet of lies, illusions, smoke, and mirrors. That's why so many of us are escaping as a way to cope with our misery. The question isn't if we're escaping, it's how. Are you doom scrolling, you gaming, you gambling, you drinking, you overeating, you going to church, you smoking the devil's lettuce, riding that white horse of cocaine, like the old people used to say? Maybe your escape is overworking, binge watching, or throwing yourself into creative projects. And I'm not even saying that all of that is bad, right? It's just what we do to manage disillusionment. This is a fight for our nation's sobriety. So here's the thing too. The eclipse itself is on the Uranus and Pluto midpoint. That's the combination for the collapse of the old order and the construction of the new. This is revolution, subversive activities, violence, accidents, enforcement of decisions in the combination of stellar influences. It says it's the combination for putting the GUN to someone's head. Also, because the eclipse is on this Uranus-Pluto midpoint, and I already told you that Saturn is opposite the eclipse, then that means Saturn is also on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. Saturn on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint can mean one-sidedness, self-will, egoism, stubbornness, hatred, exposure to extremely great pressure by others, separation caused through major force. That one's sounding real dicey. And I want so badly for all of this to stay on paper, but that's not how policy works, and we're already well past that. And I want to just make 3 quick points about Mars in this chart before we move on, because it's standing on 3 telling midpoints. First, Uranus Admetos. That combination screams terror, suppression, the sudden end of work activity. Somebody's getting fired, okay, more layoffs. It also points to earthquakes, literal or metaphorical. Second, we have the Jupiter-Hades midpoint, and all that together means reduced success because of lack of money, disturbances with employees, conflict in the workplace. So again, the workers are pissed. Sidebar, if you don't know what these trans-Neptunian planets are that I'm mentioning and you want to learn about them, I have a masterclass called Probing the Periphery. The name is terrible. The content is great. I will say it's for more like medium-ish to advanced astrologers, but people have given it rave reviews and the chart examples are really interesting. And thirdly, of the Mars midpoints that we're talking about, Chiron node. This is wounded, injured connection. So taken together, this whole lineup makes me think of healthcare workers, clergy members, people on the front lines working in brutal conditions with people who are poor, marginalized, or unhoused. And then those same people being terrorized or suppressed. It's a lot, but not all of this is happening in a vacuum, of course. Now let's zoom out. Okay, so this eclipse doesn't stand alone. Again, it's a part of a Saros series that's been repeating for over a century now. And every time it shows up, we see the same kinds of stories. In 2007, Bear Stearns collapses. The Patriots get caught spying with Spygate. Former Prime Minister of Pakistan. Benazir Bhutto is assassinated. But also, the first iPhone had just launched and started changing how we connect in the world. 1989, Tiananmen Square massacred. The Central Park Five are accused and convicted of a crime that they did not commit. And of course, there was lots of news stories demonizing these people who were innocent. The Berlin Wall falls. A train collision happens in Pakistan. It's heavy, yes, but the fall of the wall was also the start of reunification and new freedoms. In 1971, we saw the Attica uprising and massacre at the prison. Anti-war draft raids. A jet collided with the passenger plane in Japan, and MLB came out with its first all-black lineup. That was history-making. In 1953, Queen Elizabeth is crowned. The CIA supports a coup in Iran. Polio vaccines roll out. Soviets crush protests in East Berlin. McCarthyism is rising in the US, but those polio vaccines saved countless lives. In 1935, the Social Security Act passes. There's also a major uprising in Harlem. Alcoholics Anonymous is founded. FDR launches the New Deal, and German Jews are stripped of their citizenship. But again, there were some good things that came out of this time, like AA, Social Security. In 1917, the first woman takes her seat in Congress. The US enters World War II. There's Russian revolutions. The Spanish flu kills millions of people. Different decades, same theme: labor, health, debt, uprisings, war, disasters, propaganda, but also moments of breakthrough, resilience, and progress. All right, let's land this plane. If you skip straight here, this is the microwave version. This eclipse at 29 degrees Virgo is about discernment. Virgo's job is to separate what nourishes from what poisons. And at the Anaretic Degree, the stakes are mighty high. Add in the South Node, and this is about release. What needs to go so you can move forward? For the US, it's a money and debt story. Scarcity, layoffs, food and resources are under pressure. We saw this with the Aries Ingress. Saturn and Neptune bring fog and disappointment. Mars and Pluto scream crisis in leadership, communication, propaganda. And the Sabian symbol reminded us, safeguard what actually matters. Don't chase the false alarms. So what do you do with all that? Maybe skip the manifesting, okay? I know people love to set intentions with the new moon and you're grown so you can do what you want to do, but eclipses are really too chaotic for that, right? So instead, consider resting, observing. Notice what's surfacing without rushing out to go fix it. And reflect back on fall 2007. What was shifting for you back then? For me, I moved to a new state to start my first big girl job. It was hard, but that place eventually became a second home to me. And those echoes from 2007 are going to show up again now. So write about your own 2007 moment. you'll see threads that matter for the year ahead. You'll also want to look at which house in your chart this eclipse is falling in. That will give you clues as to what part of your life will be most impacted by sudden change, crisis, and transition. Clean it up. That could mean your health, your money, or your media diet. Eclipses speed up the inevitable. So if you stay focused on what's real, what's healthy, and what's necessary, you'll move through this with clarity. Now, here's your assignment. So drop your 2007 story in the comments and let me know if this eclipse is hitting any personal planets in your chart. And of course, hit like, subscribe, and share this with somebody who needs to stay woke. If you want to receive weekly astrological and tarot insights, check out my newsletter, Tomorrow's Truth Today. The link is in the description box below. Thank you for rocking with me. I appreciate you. Peace, homie.